This presentation is the first in a series of presentations on different methods for factoring polynomials. Before we just jump right into the mechanics here, I want to be clear on what we mean by factoring a polynomial. And I think it helps to kind of take a step back from polynomials and look at numbers. Right? When we talk about factoring a number like 15, what we mean is we're going to rewrite this as the product of two smaller numbers, in this case 5 times 3. Factoring polynomials means the same thing. Right? So if I start off with a polynomial like this one, I could factor this to x times x plus 1. In this case, the factors in the factored version are smaller in the sense that their degree is lower. Right? The original polynomial was quadratic or second degree. The two factors here, they're both linear or first degree. So this is what we mean by factoring. There's a lot of reasons for wanting to factor a polynomial. We can get some interesting information about the polynomial by looking at its factors. And this is also going to be a key step in the process for solving polynomial equations, which we're also going to spend some time talking about later on here. So with that said, let's think about the very first step in the process for factoring a polynomial, and that's factoring out the greatest common factor. And I've got a procedure here for doing this. Right? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the individual terms and find their greatest common factor. Then I'm going to rewrite each of the terms as the greatest common factor times something else. Then I'm going to factor that greatest common factor out. I'm going to use the distributive property. All right, so let's look at an example. We've got a polynomial here for us to try factoring. And the two terms that we're going to look at in step 1 are 3x squared and 12x. So my first step is going to be to find their greatest common factor. That's what we talked about in the previous lecture. I'm not going to walk through all of the steps of that. At this point, hopefully you're squared away on that. If not, you can jump back and watch that lecture again. The greatest common factor of these two monomials is going to be 3x. Okay, so now here comes the first of the really kind of factoring steps. I'm going to rewrite 3x squared and 12x as 3x times something. Right, so looking at the 3x squared, I'm going to start with 3x. And to turn that into x squared, I have to multiply it by x. So that's the first term. 3x times x is 3x squared. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the second part. I'm going to have another 3x. I'm going to say 3x times what is 12x? Well, I already have the x part. All I need to do is add a 4. Right? 3 times 4 is 12, and that gives me the 12x. And now I can do the actual factoring step. You notice how both of these two terms now have a 3x in them. So to do the factoring step, I'm going to apply the distributive property, and I'm going to take that 3x that those terms have in common, bring it out in front. What's left from the first term is the x, and what's left from the second term is the 4, and that's what goes inside the parentheses here. And that's my factor version. You notice I did do what I said I was going to do. We started off with a quadratic polynomial, and I have rewritten this as the product of two linear polynomials. So that did achieve our factoring goal. So that's the general process, the general procedure for factoring out a polynomial. There are a lot of individual kind of cases that you can see where you have to do this. They all follow this same general procedure. But some of them, they do kind of look different. Maybe they have more than one variable. Maybe they have negative signs in them that you have to manage. So if you're already familiar with this part of the factoring process and you want to go on to the next lecture, the first link down below will take you to the next procedure, where we're going to talk about the procedure for factoring a quadratic polynomial. If you'd like to see some more examples of how this is handled in some individual cases, the other link down below will take you to the first in a series of examples that walk you through how to use the procedure.